following the woman in green. Drizzling rain fell in silence, yet it never seemed to touch the ground. The droplets hovered in midair as if trapped between life and death, dissolving into the thick mist that clung to the earth like a burial shroud. The cemetery was unnervingly quiet, so quiet that Elena Carter could hear her own heartbeat. She stood before the cold, unforgiving gravestone of Ryan Walker, her fingers trembling as they clutched the edges of her coat. The air around her felt thick, suffocating, as if something unseen was watching, waiting. Her gaze fell upon the inscription carved into the stone. Ryan Walker, a wonderful friend, a soul that will never fade. A lie. Time was already devouring him. No one spoke of Ryan anymore. His voice, his laughter, every trace of him was dissolving into the void, slipping away like a dream upon waking. Even she could feel the edges of her memories blurring, fading. A gust of wind whispered through the cemetery. But it was not just the wind. Elena felt it. A presence. Something wrong. The air turned ice cold. The scent of wet earth twisted into something rotten. And she was no longer alone. She turned. Through the thick veil of fog, a figure stood motionless. A woman dressed in deep emerald green. Had been no sound, no footsteps, no breath, no indication that she had arrived. Yet she was there. Shadows clung to her, coiling around the fabric of her gown like living tendrils. Her long black hair draped over her shoulders, her skin pale, almost translucent, and her eyes empty. No pupils, no light, just two hollow voids, endless and devouring. Elena Carter. Her name was spoken, but it was not just a name. It was a summoning, a claim. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She stepped back instinctively, but her feet would not move. The woman remained motionless, yet her shadow stretched forward, creeping toward Elena like skeletal fingers. I am the keeper of memories. The voice did not come from the woman's lips. It came from everywhere. A whisper that slithered into Elena's mind, curling around her thoughts like a cold-blooded serpent. And I have come to remind you of the price of forgetting. The world shuddered. Reality cracked. The grass withered beneath her feet. Gravestones splintered. Skeletal trees twisted and reached out like gnarled hands grasping for her. No! The world wasn't changing. She was. A sharp coldness spread through her veins. Her skin turned pale, translucent, her fingers thinning into mist. Oh! She was vanishing. Her breath hitched. An unseen force tightened around her throat, choking the air from her lungs. What are you doing to me? Elena gasped, but her voice sounded wrong, distorted, like an echo from a place she didn't belong. The woman smiled, a smile that was not warm nor human. If Ryan is forgotten, her voice rippled through the air, warping reality itself. Then so are you. Her memories began to unravel. Ryan's face blurred, his voice reduced to static. She clawed at the edges of her mind, trying to hold on to him, but the harder she tried, the faster he dissolved into nothing. Her heart pounded in terror. No, please! Darkness swallowed her whole. Elena screamed, but her scream made no sound. And then everything went black. Nếu bạn muốn mình đọc nó với tông giọng rùng rợn, mình có thể hướng dẫn bạn làm hiệu ứng giọng ma mị hoặc mô tả cách để thu âm một cách ám ảnh hơn. Chapter 2, The Cracks in Memory. Elena jerked awake, but something was wrong. She couldn't breathe. The air around her was thick like molten tar, each breath heavy, clogged, as if something was pressing down her throat, filling her lungs with a thick, sticky darkness. She was no longer in the cemetery. Instead, she stood in the middle of a never-ending corridor. The walls breathed. They weren't still. They pulsed like massive lungs, black veins sprawling across the cold stone. And on those walls, doors. Endless doors, each one containing a memory. Elena knew that, without needing to be told. She could feel it in her bones. Behind each door was a piece of her memory of Ryan. But they were rotting. The doors were decaying, wood peeling away in brittle splinters, thick black liquid oozing from the cracks like blood from something slowly dying. Elena froze. She stepped forward, trembling fingers reaching for one of the doors. The moment her skin brushed against it, the entire door crumbled into ash, dissolving like burnt paper. And at that moment, Ryan faded a little more. Elena felt it. Her memory of his face blurred, like a painting left out in the rain. She couldn't remember what colour his eyes were anymore. No! No, that's impossible! She lunged for another door. She pulled it open and fell into a distorted nightmare. She saw Ryan, but he was standing with his back to her, his silhouette drenched in darkness. Ryan, she called, but her voice wasn't hers anymore. It echoed, distorted, like a broken radio signal. Ryan didn't turn, but his shadow did. Something, not Ryan, twisted its head to face her. No face, no eyes, no nose, only a blank void, as if someone had erased him from existence. Elena staggered back, but the nightmare was far from over. The darkness moved. Long, gnarled, blackened fingers slithered up from the ground like starving serpents, coiling around her legs, dragging her down. Ryan's voice echoed, but in reverse. His familiar words, his laughter, the warmth of his voice, everything came out of the faceless shadow, but played backward. His voice became a twisted, inhuman wail, stretching like the screams of souls trapped in an old cassette tape. Elena was sinking. Her nails scratched at the void, trying to hold on to a sliver of memory, but everything slipped through her fingers like sand through a sieve. She screamed, and the door shut. Elena awoke. She was kneeling in the cemetery, gasping for breath, but something was gone. She looked around, panicked. Something had been here, something had been real, but now she could no longer remember Ryan. Now for the final touch! I'll record this in a dark, chilling and unsettling tone to match the mood. Stay tuned. The vanishing! The names that no longer exist. Elena collapsed to her knees, her breath ragged and uneven. The cemetery was eerily silent. The wind blew through the twisted, gnarled branches of the willow trees, their long limbs hanging like skeletal fingers, dry leaves scraped against the tombstones, whispering in a voice only the dead could understand. But Elena couldn't feel anything. Something was missing. Her hand trembled as she reached up to her forehead, trying to hold on to something real. Ryan. The name was still in her mind. But what else? His face was a smear of colour, shifting, fading. She could almost see him, But the moment she focused, his features dissolved like wet ink bleeding into the pages of a forgotten book. Her stomach twisted. She had forgotten Ryan. No, that's impossible. She stumbled to her feet, desperate for something real. The tombstone in front of her was cold beneath her fingers, but the name carved into the stone. She couldn't read it. The letters were erased, swallowed by time, as if the person buried there had never existed at all. She turned. She froze. Every tombstone was the same. All the names had vanished. The hollow-faced people, the sound of church bells tolled in the distance. Elena shuddered. The chimes rang out, long and slow, each note dragging reality further into distortion. Something was wrong. She turned her head and saw them. A crowd, dressed in black, standing at the entrance of the cemetery. Faces she should have known but didn't. They were familiar yet impossible to place, like blurred figures in an old photograph. And the worst part, they had no eye! Only empty, black voids where their eyes should have been. Her breath hitched. She stepped back. Ryan. She didn't know who she was calling anymore. The name came from her lips, but it had become weightless, detached from meaning. The crowd moved forward, their footsteps perfectly synchronized, soundless, their blank faces turned toward her, empty sockets locked onto her presence. Then, from their mouths, a voice. Elena? The woman in green's voice, but it didn't come from just one mouth. It came from all of them, a chorus of whispers. Layered, distorted, endless. A sound that dug into her skull like thousands of insects crawling under her skin. 3. The price of forgetting. Elena ran. Her feet pounded against the damp earth, but there was no sound. Not from her footsteps, not from the world around her. She wasn't running. The world itself was disintegrating. The trees, the tombstones, the sky, everything blurred and cracked, colour draining away as if the universe was being erased, stroke by stroke. She screamed, but no sound came out. Her throat was hollow, an abyss where her voice should have been. Then her hands flew to her mouth. It was gone. No lips, no tongue, just a smooth blank space where her mouth had been. Her memories were being erased. And with them, she was disappearing too. She turned. The woman in green stood before her, smiling, a smile that was not human. "Elena, now you understand, don't you?" The voice whispered directly into her mind, bypassing her ears, bypassing sound itself. A cold wind blew through her skull. "Elena," the woman raised a hand. Her fingers were translucent, shifting like mist. They brushed against Elena's forehead, and the world shattered.
4.
Nothing left but ashes. Elena woke up in her room. Her body was drenched in sweat, her breath a frantic mess. Her fingers dug into her scalp, her head throbbing as if knives had pierced her brain. That nightmare, it wasn't real, it couldn't be real. She turned toward the mirror, and she wasn't there. No reflection. She touched her own face, feeling her skin, her breath, her warmth. She was here, but in the mirror, there was nothing. A tremor ran down her spine. She reached out, pressing her fingertips against the cold glass. Then, a message scratched itself onto the surface, as if unseen nails were clawing through the glass from the other side. Letters etched themselves in deep, jagged strokes, and the words that appeared, "How long before everyone forgets you too?" Are you ready for the final touch? I will now record this with a chilling, eerie, and unsettling tone, delivering the perfect horror experience. Stay tuned. The signs of fading. Elena stumbled back from the mirror, her heart hammering in her chest. The words etched onto the glass were still there, smeared with condensation, as if something unseen had clawed them in from the other side. "How long before everyone forgets you too?" She clutched at her throat, feeling the cold seep into her bones. No, she was still here. She still remembered herself, didn't she? Her trembling fingers snatched up her phone from the table, her contacts list. She typed in Ryan's name. No results. Her breath hitched. Frantically, she scrolled down. Each name in her contacts flickered and faded, as if some unseen hand was deleting every person from her life. She typed in Mom. No results. Dad. No results. Her lungs seized as if the very air was being siphoned away. The names, the numbers, all of them were gone. Like she had never known anyone, like the world had erased her before she could erase it. 2. The knocking in the night. A cold wind slithered through the cracked window, making the thin curtains shudder. Elena hugged her arms, the chill crawling over her skin like unseen fingers.
Then, knock, knock, knock.
Slow, deliberate, like someone knew she was inside. Her chest tightening as if a noose had cinched around her ribs. She did not want to open that door, but her feet were already moving, as if something was pulling her forward. She pressed her palm against the door, paused, took a breath, pulled it open. No one was there. The hallway was dark, lit only by the pale glow of the street lamp outside. And then, knock, knock, knock. The sound continued. Not from the front door, but from inside the house.
From inside her closet.
3. The shadow in the closet. Elena felt her stomach twist into knots. Knock, knock. The sound grew louder, as if something inside was desperate to get out. She didn't want to look, didn't want to know. But her body moved against her will. Her hand gripped the closet handle. The cold metal burned against her skin. Then she yanked it open. The closet was empty. No clothes, no shelves, nothing. Just a yawning black void stretching deep into the darkness, as if the closet was no longer a closet, but a passage into something else. A breath, cold as death, drifted out. Then 2 pale hands reached out. 4. No way back. Elena screamed, stumbling backward. The hands did not belong to her. They belonged to something else, a figure that slowly crawled out from the void. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth, only a smooth porcelain-like surface, as if it had never been finished. Yet somehow it was looking at her, and the worst part, it looked just like her. A faceless version of herself. Her stomach twisted in sheer horror. She wanted to run, to scream, but her legs were frozen in place. The duplicate reached for her, its fingers slender and cold, almost inviting. Elena, her own voice came from its mouth.
No, 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 no.
She staggered back. And then a hand shot out from the darkness behind her, grabbing her ankle, and a voice whispering right against her ear. "Are you ready to disappear? It's getting darker and more intense, isn't it? I'll now record this in a chilling, eerie and unsettling tone, delivering the ultimate horror experience. Stay tuned." Darkness consumes. Elena screamed, thrashing as the cold, dead fingers tightened around her ankle, but it wouldn't let go. The pull grew stronger, dragging her toward the darkness inside the closet.
No, no.
She clawed at the wooden floor, nails splitting and tearing as she struggled to hold on. The faceless figure still stood there, its head tilting, watching her struggle with an eerie curiosity. "Elena!" It spoke her name again, but this time the voice wasn't hers anymore. It was hollow, empty, like a void speaking directly into her soul. And then it took a step toward her. The shadows behind it expanded, as if another world was bleeding into this one. She was going to be pulled in. No one would save her. No one remembered her anymore.
Reality shatters.
A sharp pain exploded in Elena's head. The world around her rippled like reality itself was cracking apart. For a single moment, she was no longer on her bedroom floor. She was standing in the middle of a cemetery. The wind howled through the leafless trees, gravestones fading away, then vanishing, all except for one, the only one left, carved into the stone. 1988. She gasped, feeling her blood turn to ice. No, she reached out to touch the grave, but her hand passed straight through it, like she wasn't real anymore, like she was nothing but a ghost. 3. The whispers of oblivion. Elena, she turned. The faceless thing stood behind her, only a few steps away. It wasn't in her room anymore. It had pulled her into its world. Darkness bled outward, swallowing everything around them. "Elena, they've already forgotten you." She shook violently, her entire being unraveling. No, this couldn't be real. "I will take you where you belong." It reached out, its pale fingers opening. One more second. And then a bell rang. Want me to continue with Chapter 6 and take this horror to the final climax? The bell that awakens the forgotten. Mort. The bell rings in the darkness. The bell rang out. Its chime cut through the void, shaking the very fabric of the shadows. Gasped for air, feeling the invisible chains strangling her soul loosen, if only for a moment. The faceless entity froze, its head tilting slightly as it too had heard the sound. The bell rang again! This time, closer, louder. She felt it reverberating inside her chest, a storm tearing through the abyss. And then she saw it. Far in the swirling blackness, a figure emerged, not a monstrous being like the faceless entity, but a person. 2. The keeper of the bell. Stepping forward from the void, a woman clad in black robes walked toward them. She carried a silver bell in her hands, its surface engraved with ancient symbols. Elena couldn't read. Each time she shook it, the sound sent ripples through the darkness. The faceless entity trembled. For the first time, it stepped back. It was afraid. The woman lifted her gaze. Her eyes were cold as the abyss, yet her voice was calm and unwavering. "You have gone too far." She wasn't speaking to Elena. She was speaking to the faceless, it growled. For the first time, it made a sound, a guttural, otherworldly hiss that did not belong to this realm. "You have no right to interfere. This is not your domain." The woman's voice cut through the void like a knife. The faceless thing shrank back, but its grip on Elena remained firm. She could still feel its frozen fingers, refusing to let go. Not yet. The woman lifted the bell one more time, and this time she rang it harder.
3.
The darkness unravels. The impact exploded through the void. The swirling black mist began to crack apart, like reality itself was being stitched back together. Elena felt the creature's power weakening. It screamed, a piercing shriek that tore through the abyss, not in anger, but in fear. The darkness melted away from its form, crumbling into ashen fragments. It was no longer strong. It was no longer in control. And then it vanished, Only its shadow remained, burned into the ground as if it had never truly existed. Elena collapsed, gasping, as if she had just been pulled back from drowning. The woman stood over her, observing her with quiet intensity. "You still have time," looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" The woman placed a finger to her lips, signaling silence. Then she stepped into the shadows. The bell stopped ringing. 4. The doorway home. Elena looked around. No cemetery, no abyss. She was standing in front of her bedroom door. The mirror across the hall reflected her image, but something felt off. Everything looked the same, but she wasn't sure anymore. Taking a deep breath, Elena reached for the doorknob. She turned it. Light flooded in, and the world returned to normal. Want me to continue with Chapter 7 and take this horror to its true conclusion? In the last breath of darkness. Mort, the mirror that doesn't reflect. The door clicked shut behind Elena. Her bedroom looked the same, the bed, the desk, the night lamp, everything was familiar. But something felt wrong, the large mirror facing her door. Elena stood there, eyes wide, breath hitching. She was here, but the mirror was empty. Darkness bled from its surface as if it was never a mirror, but a doorway. And then a hand reached out from the mirror. To the imposter, the hand was black as the void, its fingers long and brittle like broken bones, scratching against the glass. From the shadows, someone stepped out. No, not someone. Erna stared at herself, but it wasn't her. The figure before her had her face, her eyes, her smile, but it was empty. It looked at her and it smiled. "Finally we meet." The voice was hers, but it echoed as if 1,000 whispers spoke in unison. Elena stumbled back, her heart pounding. "What are you?" Her doppelganger tilted its head, as if it didn't understand the question. Then it whispered, "I am you, if you were never saved." 3. Erased from memory. Elena couldn't breathe. The room twisted around her as if reality was slipping away. Her doppelganger took a step forward. Each step cracked the floor, oozing blackness like bleeding veins. "Did you really think you escaped me?" It chuckled softly. Elena shook, cold sweat drenching her back. No, this wasn't possible. She had returned to the real world. She had escaped, hadn't she? The doppelganger raised a hand. Its finger pressed lightly against Elena's forehead. "Remember, Elena, if they forget you, you will return to me." Darkness erupted, and everything collapsed into nothingness. Want to continue with Chapter 8 and push this horror to its final climax? The names that are fading. More. A call from the void jerked awake. She was in her bed. Her room was still there. The mirror no longer showed the doppelganger, but there was something else. On the glass surface, faint words began to appear. She squinted. Hundreds, thousands of names. All of them were fading away. She scanned the endless list until a horrifying realization gripped her chest. She saw it.
Her name?
The letter shook, blurring like someone was erasing her existence from this world.
No!
Elena lunged toward the mirror, trembling fingers pressing against her name, trying to hold on to the last pieces of herself. But one by one, the letters vanished until there was nothing left. 2. Stolen memories. Darkness spilled from the mirror, swallowing the room like an invisible flood. Elena felt the world tilting. She was dragged into the mirror. Everything distorted, twisting, spinning until she hit the cold, unforgiving ground. She was no longer in her bedroom. Around her was an endless corridor, lined with doors like nameless tombstones. At the very end, there were whispers. Elena shivered, her heart hammering as she stepped forward. The voices were familiar. She knew them. Her mother's voice, Lucas's voice, the voices of those who once loved her. But something was wrong. They were talking about her, but no one could remember her name. That girl, what was her name? I don't remember. I thought I knew, but who was she? Her name? It's gone. Elena froze, her blood turning to ice. She screamed, "It's Elena, it's me!" No one heard her. No one reacted, because to them, She had never existed. Do you want to continue with Chapter 9 and find out if Elena can reclaim her name before she completely disappears? The names that are fading. A call from the void jerked awake. She was in her bed. Her room was still there. The mirror no longer showed the doppelganger, but there was something else. On the glass surface, faint words began to appear. She squinted. Hundreds, thousands of names. All of them were fading away. She scanned the endless list until a horrifying realization gripped her chest. She saw it.
Her name.
The letter shook, blurring like someone was erasing her existence from this world.
No! No!
Elena lunged toward the mirror, trembling fingers pressing against her name, trying to hold on to the last pieces of herself. But one by one, the letters vanished until there was nothing left. 2 stolen memories. Darkness spilled from the mirror, swallowing the room like an invisible flood. Elena felt the world tilting. She was dragged into the mirror. Everything distorted, twisting, spinning until she hit the cold, unforgiving ground. She was no longer in her bedroom. Around her was an endless corridor, lined with doors like nameless tombstones. At the very end, there were whispers. Elena shivered, her heart hammering as she stepped forward. The voices were familiar. She knew them. Her mother's voice, Lucas's voice, the voices of those who once loved her. But something was wrong. They were talking about her, but no one could remember her name. That girl, what was her name? I don't remember. I thought I knew, but who was she? Her name? It's gone. Elena froze, her blood turning to ice. She screamed, "It's Elena, it's me!" No one heard her. No one reacted, because to them, she had never existed. Do you want to continue with Chapter 9 and find out if Elena can reclaim her name before she completely disappears?
9. The Game of Shadows. The final room.
Elena ran through the endless hallway, her breath ragged, her heart pounding like war drums. The doors on either side remained shut, but as she passed, they shook, echoing whispers and muffled cries. No one remembered her. No one called her name. She was disappearing. At the end of the hallway, a single door stood slightly open, and from inside, a voice stretched out. "Come in, Elena! If you still believe you exist." She clenched her fist and shoved the door open. Shut too, facing the darkness. Inside, a circle of mirrors, infinite, reflecting hundreds of twisted versions of herself. At the center stood her doppelganger. It was no longer smiling. It was waiting. Elena shivered, staring at the distorted reflections in the mirrors. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this to me?" The darkness quivered. The doppelganger stepped forward, its empty eyes a void without end. "Because if no one remembers you, you are no longer you. You are only me." 3. The fight for her name. The ground cracked open. Darkness coiled around Elena's legs, dragging her down as if the world was devouring her whole. No. It couldn't end like this. She gritted her teeth, reaching deep into her memories. Moments with Lucas. Memories with her mother. Her name. She screamed, "I am not forgotten. I am still here." The darkness shuddered. The mirrors shattered. The doppelganger jerked backward, its body fracturing into thousands of pieces. Memories swirling through the air. It screamed, its voice splitting reality itself, before it ceased to exist. Chapter 10. A name that was not forgotten. Elena gasped awake. She was in her bed. Morning light streamed through the window. She sat up, taking a deep, trembling breath. She was still here. She was still Elena Holloway. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. "Good morning, my sweet Elena. Did you sleep well?" She smiled. She still existed. This is the end! A story of fighting to hold on to one's identity, memories, and existence. What do you think?